I used to think my parents would help me pay for college. It felt like a given, something they promised in the years before. Education is everything, my dad would say, sitting in his leather chair, surrounded by the comfort of a life that was always about success. They had money, good money. But when it was time to apply for financial aid, that's when the truth came crashing down. My mom looked at me over the kitchen table, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air before she spoke. "We just can't afford it right now," she said. I stared back at her, unable to speak. How could they say that when they had everything? And with that, I was left to figure it out on my own. I took on part-time jobs, running from shift to shift, barely sleeping, all while trying to maintain my grades. My parents said they were working on it, but as the months went by, nothing changed. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't help, not with their financial security, not when I had always tried to be the good kid. My dad, who always dressed impeccably, would drive his brand new car, which I could barely fathom affording, yet I was struggling to make ends meet. Every time I mentioned it, the response was the same. "Don't worry, you'll figure it out." "You're smart." They weren't worried about me. They were too busy with their own lives to notice the weight of the world was falling on my shoulders. By the time I graduated, I was buried under mountains of student loans. It wasn't just the tuition, it was the interest, the fees, the pressure to find a job that would pay well enough to lift me from the hole I had been digging for 4 years. My parents never acknowledged it. They never asked if I was okay. They didn't even offer to help with the payments once I started working. It was like I was a burden, and the money I owed was a problem I had to solve alone. When I finally landed my first full-time job, I was exhausted. I had a degree, but it felt more like a chain around my neck. And the hardest part? I knew I couldn't count on my parents for any kind of relief. Then, a few years later, the conversation began. It started innocently enough, just a casual mention of their plans for the future. But I knew something was off when they started asking about my finances. "We've been thinking about retirement," my dad said, his voice casual, like we were just talking about a vacation. "But we're a little short. We need help, Craig." I almost choked on my coffee. Help? After everything they'd put me through, after making me pay my own way, now they needed me to bail them out. At first, I thought I'd misheard, but as my mom chimed in, it became clear. They were asking me to pay for their retirement. They weren't even pretending to have it together anymore. And that was the moment everything changed. The demand came with no apology, no acknowledgement of their past actions. "You've got a good job now, Craig," my dad continued. "You could help us." It's the right thing to do. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on me. The right thing to do? They hadn't been the right thing parents for me. They hadn't helped when I was drowning in debt. They had left me to struggle while they enjoyed their lifestyle. And now, they wanted me to fix their problems? I tried to speak, but the words didn't come. All I could manage was a forced nod, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. How could they ask me for this? And worse, how could they think I would say yes? "You know, Craig, we've always sacrificed for you," my mom said softly, her voice thick with guilt. "You're our only child. We've done everything to make sure you had a better life. Don't you want us to have a peaceful retirement?" I wanted to scream, to tell them how selfish they were, but I didn't. Instead, I felt that familiar wave of guilt crashing over me, the same guilt that had kept me silent all those years. I'd always tried to make them proud. I'd worked so hard to succeed, hoping they'd see me as more than just a disappointment. And now it felt like I was back in that same place, trapped, expected to give up everything for their comfort. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I knew deep down I couldn't ignore the feeling of betrayal that had started to gnaw at me. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle of it. I was still paying off my own loans, living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to get ahead. But now, my parents were asking me to take care of their future? I started making calculations in my head, trying to figure out if I could even afford it. The answer was always no. Yet they pushed. They came over, sat me down, and laid out their retirement plan like it was my responsibility to make it happen. "If we don't get this sorted soon," my dad said, "we won't have anything left." I had to bite my tongue to keep from snapping. How could they not see how wrong this was? They weren't asking, they were demanding, and it felt like I was being backed into a corner. The more they pushed, the more I realized how much manipulation was involved. My mom would cry, talking about how they had given everything for me, how their whole lives had been devoted to ensuring I had opportunities they never had. My dad would nod along, his voice low and firm, reinforcing the idea that family helps each other. I kept hearing the same thing. This is what families do for each other. But I wasn't sure if they even saw me as an individual anymore. I was just a means to an end. Their guilt trip wasn't just about money. It was about making me feel like a failure if I didn't comply. They were trying to control me, to make me feel responsible for their choices. I stopped answering their calls as often. I distanced myself emotionally, but it didn't help. Every time I did talk to them, I felt this creeping sense of resentment building. How had I ended up here? How had they gotten so comfortable expecting me to sacrifice everything for them? I started avoiding family gatherings, giving excuses not to see them. I knew they'd bring it up again, and I didn't know how to say no without completely burning bridges. It was easier to stay away than to face the pressure. But the guilt followed me everywhere. I wasn't just afraid of disappointing them. I was afraid of what would happen if I finally stood up for myself. One day, after yet another request, I finally snapped. I told them I couldn't do it. I told them I wasn't in a financial position to take on their retirement. It felt like a weight was lifted, but I knew the fallout would come. My mom stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You don't understand," she said, her voice sharp. "This is what family does for each other. How could you turn your back on us?" My dad didn't say a word, but the silence between us felt louder than any argument could have. It was the first time I had ever truly stood up to them, and yet, I felt like I was still the bad guy. The weeks that followed were the hardest. My parents' disappointment loomed over me like a cloud, their silent treatment more suffocating than any argument. Every time I saw them, it was like I could feel the walls between us getting thicker. My mom would give me sad looks, and my dad would say little, but his eyes spoke volumes. The tension was unbearable. I kept thinking about all the years I'd tried to meet their expectations, to make them proud. And now, it seemed like no matter what I did, it was never enough. I could feel their resentment burning through every glance, every word they didn't say. But more than anything, I felt a sense of betrayal. They had taken so much from me, my time, my energy, and now my peace. I had nothing left to give. As the days dragged on, I began to see just how deep the manipulation went. My parents didn't just want money, they wanted control. They didn't care that I was struggling to build my own life. They only saw me as a solution to their problem. I had always felt like I didn't fit in their world, but now it was clearer than ever. They were using their financial needs as a weapon to keep me tethered to them, and I was starting to see how much of my life had been shaped by their selfish expectations. They never cared about my success. They only cared about what they could extract from it. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about me breaking free from their grasp, and that was the hardest part of all. I kept quiet, but inside, something had shifted. I no longer felt obligated to keep up appearances for them. I had always done what was expected of me. Got the job, worked hard, stayed out of trouble. But the more they pushed, the more I realized how much of my life had been shaped by their demands. For the first time, I began to question whether my parents ever truly cared about me, or if I had just been a tool for their ambitions. As I withdrew further from their expectations, I began focusing on my own goals. I knew I couldn't afford their retirement, but I could still build my own future, one free of their manipulation. Every decision I made for myself. And the more I did that, the more I felt like I was becoming the person I was meant to be, not the person they wanted me to be. Then it hit me. They never saw me as an individual. I was just the son who could solve their problems, the one who was supposed to take care of them when they couldn't be bothered to plan for themselves. They never asked what I needed, what I wanted. They only asked what I could give them. It wasn't just a financial burden, it was an emotional one too. The realization stung harder than I expected. How had I let them shape my life for so long without questioning it? How had I let their expectations define my worth? And more than anything, how had I let them believe I owed them something, anything, after everything they had put me through? I decided it was time to confront them, once and for all. I couldn't keep living in this tension. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it was clearly falling apart. The next time they came over, I didn't hold back. I told them that I wasn't going to pay for their retirement. I told them I couldn't continue sacrificing my future to fix their mistakes. My dad, who had always been so calm and collected, lost his temper. "You think you're the only one who's worked hard?" he yelled. "We've given everything for you, and now you turn your back on us?" My mom's tears came quickly, as always, but this time they didn't have the same effect. I couldn't feel sorry for them anymore. They had drained me dry, and I wasn't about to give them any more. That night, everything broke. After the argument, I walked out, leaving them behind in the living room, their words echoing in my ears. I didn't care anymore. I had spent my entire life trying to please them, trying to make them proud, but it was never enough. The more I gave, the more they wanted. I realized then that I wasn't just their son. I was their lifeline, their safety net, their financial resource. And I was done being that. I had nothing left to give them, no more excuses, no more explanations. I was done being the one who always had to make things right. This time, I would focus on myself, on my future. I wasn't their solution anymore, and that was the hardest truth to accept. A few weeks passed in complete silence. I thought maybe they had finally accepted my decision. But one day, I got a message from my mom. She didn't ask for money. She didn't beg. Instead, she said, "We're sorry. We pushed too hard. We just wanted to retire with peace of mind, but we shouldn't have asked you to carry that burden." The words felt almost like a relief, but something inside me held back. This wasn't the closure I'd been hoping for. It felt empty, like a last-ditch attempt to regain some control over me. But I couldn't fall for it anymore. The damage had already been done. They had shown me who they truly were, and I wasn't going to let them back into my life just because they said sorry. I didn't need their apology. I had already made my peace. I had stopped needing their approval long before they realized how far they had pushed me. I had cut ties with them emotionally, and now I was cutting ties financially. I wasn't going to carry their weight anymore. I was building my own life, one that was free of their expectations, free of their manipulation. And when they called to ask me to reconsider, I didn't answer. I had already made my choice. This was my life, and I would live it on my terms. No more guilt, no more obligation. I was finally free.